When I went into labor, my mom said, "We can't come, too busy." I understood until that night. I saw them on Facebook. They were at my brother's barbecue to celebrate his daughter's achievements at school. I didn't cry. I just removed their access to my accounts. By morning, my mom was in my hospital room, angry. I was already in pain when the contractions started, but the message made it worse. Mom said they couldn't come. Too busy. That was it. No, I'm sorry, or we're thinking of you. Just too busy. I was in labor, 20 years old, alone in a sterile hospital room, gripping the edge of the bed because the father of my child had walked out 2 weeks earlier after calling me a burden. My parents were supposed to be the backup plan. They'd promised they'd be there when it happened. I believed them. I didn't argue, I didn't even reply. It was just easier to focus on breathing and staying conscious through the pain. Nurses came and went, asking if I wanted someone called or if I needed anything. I kept saying no. I didn't want pity. I didn't want fake comfort. I just wanted it to be over. At one point, I did something I regret, but also understand now. I thought about not keeping her. Just for a second. It hit me like a wave, that feeling of drowning. But then it passed, because I realized the baby had done nothing wrong. She was the only one in this world who hadn't let me down. So I gave everything I had for her. I don't remember much after that, except one nurse holding my hand and whispering to me about strength. I didn't cry. Not when the contractions got worse, not when I felt myself tear, not even when they placed her on my chest and I saw her face for the first time. But then that night I opened Facebook. Don't ask why. Maybe I was hoping for something, some post, some excuse, anything. That's when I saw it. Photos from my brother's backyard. Balloons, banners, smiles, a barbecue with burgers and cake and party hats, all to celebrate my niece getting Student of the Month or something equally stupid. There was Mom. There was Dad, right next to my brother, laughing and holding a plate of ribs. That was the moment I felt everything inside me go quiet. I didn't cry. I just picked up my phone and revoked access to every account they had. Banking info, emergency contacts, shared subscriptions, even the baby app I'd invited Mom to. I removed them from the photo album I'd started for my daughter. Erased them from the notification list at the hospital. All of it. Then I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling, wondering how I ever thought any of them would show up for me. By morning, my hospital room door swung open, and it was Mom. Not crying, not apologizing. Angry. And behind her, I heard my father's voice rising already. I had no idea what kind of storm was about to hit. I barely slept that night. My daughter was perfect. Quiet. Barely made a sound. But my brain wouldn't shut off. Everything felt too loud. The beeping machines. The memory of the Facebook post. The silence from my parents when I needed them most. I kept thinking, maybe they'd realize what they did. Maybe they'd show up with flowers, or food, or something to make it better. Or maybe they wouldn't show up at all. I was wrong on both counts. Morning came, and with it, my mother. She didn't knock. She didn't smile. She looked like someone who'd been personally offended, like I had ruined her week. The first thing out of her mouth wasn't congratulations. It was, "Why would you block us from everything? Your father couldn't even see the pictures of the baby. Do you have any idea how that made us feel?" She said it like I had ruined Christmas. I just sat there in bed holding my daughter, feeling the stitches pull every time I moved. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My silence made her angrier. She started pacing, called me immature, said I was blowing everything out of proportion, that it wasn't like my niece was going to win a Nobel Prize. It was just a school thing, but it was still important family time, and not everything revolves around you, Nicole. Then Dad came in louder, more aggressive. He said I had no right to cut them off, that I was acting like a brat, that just because I had a baby, I thought I could treat people however I wanted. He didn't even glance at his granddaughter, not once. I told him to leave, calm but serious. He didn't listen. He stepped closer, started yelling about how much money they'd spent on me growing up, how they raised me, and now I was punishing them. Said I was just mad because I wasn't the center of attention for 5 minutes. That's when a nurse walked in. Jenna, short, scrappy, no-nonsense type. She looked at me first, then at them, and asked if everything was okay. Dad told her to mind her business, said I was his daughter and they had a right to be here. Jenna didn't flinch. She said they needed to leave the room. He laughed in her face, told her she couldn't make him do anything. She didn't bother calling security. She handled it herself. I don't know what came over her, but she dropped the clipboard and went at him. No hesitation. Punched him right in the side of the head. He yelled, stumbled back, and she hit him again. Mom screamed. The third hit landed before he finally grabbed the door and stumbled out, swearing at everyone. Mom followed him, yelling that they'd sue the hospital and get her fired. Jenna just looked at me and asked if I wanted apple or orange juice. I picked apple. A few hours later, the hospital's head nurse came in to talk about what happened. Jenna was being spoken to, but I could tell from the way everyone treated me after that, fresh flowers in the room, extra snacks, longer check-ins, that no one really blamed her. A social worker dropped by to check on me, asked questions about my home life. I told her I'd be okay, and I meant it. I'd already decided I wasn't going back to my parents' house, not even for a visit. They'd made their choice. I was making mine. That night, I sat in the quiet again, the baby asleep next to me, her tiny hand curled like a comma. And I made a promise to myself. This was my new beginning, the start of a better story. And if anyone tried to get in the way of that, they'd regret it. I didn't know it yet, but my brother was going to be the first to try, and I was already 2 steps ahead. I was home for exactly 6 days before the first knock came. My daughter was finally getting into a rhythm, sleeping in 3-hour chunks, which felt like a miracle after those first sleepless nights. I was starting to feel like I could breathe again. I was healing. I had help from the hospital's aftercare program, a few friends from my old job who dropped off food, and the kind of peace you only get when you finally stop begging for people to care. Then came the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole, and there he was, my brother Aaron, standing there with a smirk and his stupid sunglasses propped on his head like he was dropping by for a casual catch-up. I almost didn't open the door. I should have trusted that instinct, but I did. He walked in without asking, looked around like he was evaluating the place. The first thing he said wasn't hello. It was, "So, you're really not letting Mom and Dad see the baby? Even after everything they did for you?" I didn't answer. He went on a whole rant about how selfish I was being, how our parents were heartbroken, that they were just trying their best, that I needed to grow up and move on. It was like hearing a rerun of my dad's hospital tantrum, but now coming from someone who still lived in the house I was kicked out of at 18 for refusing to major in accounting. Then he got to the point. He said, "Since you're playing adult now, and since you're getting so much support from the hospital and community groups, maybe you should start paying our parents back." I laughed. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about guilt. He wanted something. He said it directly. They're broke. They gave everything to help you, and now you're cutting them off. If you care about family at all, maybe chip in, help them out, pay a few bills. I asked him what he was doing to help. He shrugged, said he wasn't about to support 2 old losers who ruined his life. And just like that, it all clicked. The barbecue, the sudden fake concern, the guilt trip. It wasn't about my daughter. It was about their money running dry. And now that I was on my own and surviving, they saw me as a backup plan. I kept him talking. I let him rant. I asked just the right questions, pushed just the right buttons. And while he stood there, trashing our parents, calling them parasites and manipulators, talking about how he deserved more, I made sure my phone, tucked in the couch cushion next to me, was recording every word. He didn't notice, not even when he said, "You think I give a crap about Mom crying? I'd sell that house tomorrow if it was in my name. They're lucky I haven't." I let him leave thinking he'd gotten to me, thinking I'd consider paying. He had no idea I'd just collected the first piece of what would ruin everything for him. The surprise came later that night when I listened back to the recording. At the end, barely audible after I'd stood up to walk him out, there was a second voice, one I hadn't heard in years. "I told you she wasn't as soft as she used to be." A woman. Not my mom. Not anyone I recognized. Someone had been waiting in the car, listening, and I had a feeling Aaron wasn't the only one with a plan. I couldn't stop thinking about the voice on the recording. It was just a few seconds. Low, muttered, but clear enough to know it wasn't my imagination. A woman older, maybe in her 40s or 50s, confident, completely unfamiliar. She said, "I told you she wasn't as soft as she used to be." I ran that line back over and over. The way she said it, it sounded like a warning. Like she knew me, like she'd been watching. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking the baby monitor, scrolling through my front door camera footage, and playing the recording until I could recite it by heart. I even went outside around 3 in the morning, hoping the cold air would reset my brain. That's when I noticed the car parked across the street. Same one that had been there during the day. Same dent in the back left bumper. No movement, no lights. I stared at it for a full minute before it finally drove off without a sound. The next morning, Aaron was all over social media pretending he'd dropped by to check in on me like a big brother should. Said I was doing great and that he was proud of me. The comments were full of people telling him how thoughtful he was, how lucky I was to have him. He was trying to build a version of the story where he was the hero. He didn't realize I was already working on something bigger. I edited the recording just enough, cleaned up the background noise, pulled his worst lines to the front. I left the mystery voice in too. Let people wonder. Then I sent it to someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Candace. She was a former family friend. Used to live a few doors down from us growing up, but she'd had a falling out with my mom a while back. Something to do with money. She didn't like my parents. But she hated lies. I figured she'd know what to do with it. She messaged me back 10 minutes later. Said that voice? That's Morin, Aaron's fiancé. Fiancé. I had no idea Aaron was even in a serious relationship. My parents never mentioned her once. Neither had he. But apparently, they'd been engaged for months. Morin just refused to make it public because of the way Aaron treated his family. Candace gave me more. Said Morin was rich. Family money, real estate, one of those quiet heiress types who didn't like drama, but didn't tolerate liars either. And apparently, she'd been thinking about calling off the engagement already. The next day, I sent Morin the full recording directly. No message, no introduction. Just a file named, in case you think he's worth it, MP3. 3 days passed. Then the calls started. First Mom, then Dad, then Aaron. None of them left voicemails. Just missed calls, over and over. On the fourth day, a new post appeared on Facebook. Aaron's relationship status quietly changed from engaged to Morin Locke to single. That night, I got a message from Morin. Short, polite, final. Thank you, I'll take care of the rest. Whatever that meant, I was fine with it. What I didn't expect was how fast everything would fall apart after that. Because less than a week later, Aaron's life started unraveling in ways I hadn't even planned for. It started with the house. Aaron had been living in the upstairs guest apartment at our parents' place since his second failed attempt at moving out. The garage door broke. He called Dad. Groceries? Mom stocked his fridge. I guess when Morin dumped him, she wasn't subtle about why. Word got around fast, especially in a town like ours. Mom called me the morning it happened. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. Not out of curiosity, but to hear how far she'd fall before blaming me again. Her voice was shaking. She said Aaron had packed his things and stormed out, saying he'd never speak to them again. Said he'd lost everything because of that girl and the poison she was spreading. She blamed me. The next week, I found out from a mutual friend that Aaron had shown up at Morin's office demanding to talk. She had him escorted out. A video surfaced on TikTok. Not viral, but enough to humiliate him locally. He was shouting something about manipulation and blackmail while security pulled him back. It was blurry, but his face was clear enough. Then came his job. Mom had pulled strings to get him in. That didn't last long after that. Then came the money. I don't know if Morin had been helping him out or if he'd just been living way beyond his means, but something snapped. I started getting texts from a number I didn't recognize begging for help. Said he needed a place to crash. Said he was in danger of doing something stupid. I didn't reply. Mom and Dad weren't doing much better. Without Morin and her money, and with Aaron unraveling in public, the attention turned back on them. They were the ones who raised him. They were the ones who kept defending him, backing his lies. And now everyone saw it. One night, a car pulled up in front of my house. I watched from the window, arms crossed, heart steady. It was them. They didn't ring the doorbell right away, just sat there like they were working up the nerve. I saw Mom wiping her face. Dad gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Eventually, they came to the door, knocked twice, waited. I opened it. They didn't say a word at first, just stood there. Then Mom's voice cracked. She said they were sorry, that they hadn't known how badly they'd failed me, that Aaron had always been their focus because he was the louder one, the problem child, and they'd convinced themselves I didn't need as much. She said watching him collapse made them realize something. He'd never learned to stand alone because they never let him. But I had. Then came the part I didn't expect. Dad, the man who once screamed at me in a hospital room, got down on his knees. He actually knelt on my front porch. Mom followed. They begged me to forgive them. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let them in. The baby stirred in the other room like she knew something was changing. That maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn. They weren't perfect. I wasn't ready to forget everything. But something about seeing them like that, broken, humbled, human, made me realize how far I'd come, and how far they'd had to fall to finally see it. They looked smaller than I remembered. When they sat down in my living room, it was like someone had taken the fight out of them. They didn't fill the space like they used to. Dad kept his hands folded tight in his lap. Mom's eyes didn't stop moving. From the baby photos on the walls, to the bassinet in the corner, to me, like she was trying to memorize everything she'd missed in a single glance. No one said a word at first. Then the baby cried. I didn't rush. I walked to her slowly, picked her up, and sat back down in the armchair across from them. I cradled her like I always did. She settled quickly, resting her tiny cheek against my chest. Mom whispered her name just once, almost like she was scared to say it out loud. Then came the apology, or something close to it. She said they didn't come to the hospital because they thought I didn't need them, that I'd been doing so well on my own, and they didn't want to interfere. But that wasn't it. I could hear it in her voice. That wasn't the truth. She was scared of seeing me become something she wasn't ready to face. A mother, a woman who didn't need her anymore. Dad didn't say much at first, just sat there nodding like he was agreeing with things he hadn't even heard yet. Then he finally spoke, and his voice was different, quieter. He said he didn't come because he thought I'd forgive him anyway, like I always did. That he never imagined I'd actually cut them off, and that scared him more than anything. He said the scariest part was realizing I had a life now that didn't include them. A good one. And then he said it. I was wrong. We were wrong. I didn't cry. I told them forgiveness wasn't something they got just for showing up. That I'd raised their granddaughter alone when it mattered most. That the only people who helped me were strangers and scrubs, and a nurse who punched my father in the side of the head. I said it like a fact, not a joke. They didn't laugh. I told them I didn't want grand gestures or guilt trips. I didn't care about what Aaron said or what they'd lost. If they wanted to be in our lives, they'd have to do it quietly, steadily, without expecting anything in return. Because I didn't need them anymore. But I was willing to let them earn a place again. I told them that forgiveness for me wasn't forgetting. It was seeing people clearly, maybe for the first time, and deciding to move forward anyway, knowing exactly what they did. And then the part I didn't expect. Mom asked if she could hold the baby. I paused, not because I didn't trust her, but because I wasn't sure how I would feel. Then I handed her over. She held her like she was holding something fragile and sacred, and something in her face broke open. Dad leaned in slowly like he was afraid to breathe. For the first time, they both looked at her like she wasn't just a baby. She was the beginning of something they almost lost. That night, after they left, I sat alone with my daughter in the quiet. I thought about every moment that led us here. The hospital room, the Facebook post, the betrayal, the anger, the recording, the knock at my door. And somehow, this was the ending. Not a dramatic explosion, not revenge, just two people learning that the daughter they overlooked had become the woman they now depended on to put their family back together. Or not. I forgave them on my terms. My time. And now every time they show up with groceries or watch the baby while I shower or call to ask how I'm doing for once, I remember this. I didn't win by destroying them. I won because I made it through the hardest moment of my life without them. And I survived. Better yet, I thrived. And now they get to witness that, if they're lucky.